I have the deed. I have the 1923 water rights. Every drop of water in that creek belongs to my family.
Your family abandoned this land, honey. We are just putting it to good use for the community.
These are 45 years of tax receipts and a federal dam covenant. This land never left my family.
I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. I just slid the 1923 water rights deed across the table and watched. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments right now, because you are about to see the most beautiful HOA takedown involving federal water law and gravity. My name is Jake Morrison, 34 years old, Army Corps of Engineers, third-generation owner of 47 acres of prime Texas land just outside Austin. My grandfather, Pops, bought this property in 1955 when Austin was still a sleepy college town. In 1978, he built a small earth dam on our property. Nothing fancy, just good engineering designed to collect rainwater for the cattle and help downstream neighbors during dry spells. The Army Corps even helped him with the design. Pops always said someday this land would be worth something special. Then came my 2 tours in Afghanistan, where I specialized in water management and infrastructure. Turns out building wells in a war zone teaches you exactly how precious clean water really is and how quickly people will fight over it. While I was on my second deployment, Pops passed away. The property went into a trust managed by my sister, Sarah, who lives in California and knows about as much about Texas land law as I know about surfing. She hired a property management company to handle the taxes. The taxes got paid, but Sarah never looked at the assessment. Big mistake. Enter Margaret Thornwell, 52 years old, HOA president of Willowbrook Estates, the kind of woman who drives a white BMW X7 and treats tennis outfits like business attire. Married to City Councilman Rick Thornwell, which tells you everything about how she gets things done. I came home from deployment in August 2023, ready to finally spend time on Pops' land. Drove down that familiar gravel road, expecting to see rolling pastures and that little dam sparkling in the Texas sun. Instead, I found construction crews, concrete trucks, and survey stakes scattered across my back 40 like a suburban invasion. The foreman told me they had permits, that this was Willowbrook Estates property now. I called the police. Officer Martinez showed up and explained with obvious discomfort that the HOA had filed an adverse possession claim while I was overseas. That is when Maggie appeared, riding up in her golf cart like a suburban warlord. Her voice had that syrupy sweetness that immediately made me want to check my wallet. She told me my family had abandoned this land, and they were just putting it to good use for the community. But here is what really got my blood boiling. Her construction crews had diverted the small creek that feeds Pops' dam. The water level was dropping every single day. Maggie's parting shot echoed in my ears. "You should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy." That is when I knew this was war. I hired an attorney. Big mistake. This guy quoted me $85,000 just to challenge the zoning change. Turns out, while I was serving my country, Rick had pushed through an emergency zoning modification. My family's land went from agricultural to residential development zone, faster than you can say conflict of interest. But here's where my Army Corps training kicked in. While that overpriced lawyer shuffled papers, I dug through county records like I was hunting for IEDs. I found Pops' original 1978 dam construction permits, and they were beautiful. Pops had worked directly with the Army Corps for flood control and watershed management. That meant federal jurisdiction. Any dam built with federal guidance creates federal jurisdiction that local HOAs cannot override, period. But it gets better. Buried behind a stack of 1979 tax assessments, I found a 1923 water rights deed. My great-grandfather had purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed. These rights were older than the city, older than the county's municipal water system, older than every single McMansion sitting on my land. They were not just stealing my property, they were stealing my water. I called my old Army buddy, Tony Riggs, who now works for the EPA Enforcement Division. 20 minutes on the phone taught me more about environmental law than 3 hours with that expensive attorney. Tony told me if they had diverted a natural waterway without federal permits, that was a Clean Water Act violation, and the fines started $50,000 per day. Meanwhile, Maggie was busy playing victim. She organized an emergency HOA meeting about the dangerous dam structure with a local news crew she had obviously tipped off in advance. Watched her on the evening news talking about children's safety and dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She posted on Nextdoor warning about aggressive property disputes and unstable individuals in the area.
never mentioned my name, but in a community that small, she did not have to. The harassment campaign was textbook intimidation, noise complaints, unsightly structure citations for my farmhouse that had been standing since 1962, an IRS audit, a wellness check through Veteran Services arranged by Rick using his city council position. The social worker showed up, while Maggie watched from her golf cart like she was supervising a military inspection. Then I discovered their entire development had been built in a 100-year floodplain. Insurance companies had initially refused coverage until the HOA provided a flood mitigation plan. Their solution was to permanently divert Willow Creek away from the new homes and let it flood my property instead. And here's where the beautiful part. That little earth dam Pops built in 1978 included an emergency spillway system with hydraulic gates that had not been opened since 1982. The mechanism was still functional, and it was designed for exactly this situation. I calculated the water volume needed to restore Willow Creek to its original path, 2.8 million gallons. The dam was holding 3.1 million gallons thanks to recent rainfall. The math was perfect. I hired environmental attorney Amanda Cross, who specialized in pro bono water rights cases. Together, we built a coalition. Miguel Santos, whose family farm had been rezoned out of existence by Rick 2 years earlier. Mrs. Chen, whose ancestral garden had withered since the creek diversion. The Audubon Society was particularly interested to learn the diversion had destroyed critical nesting habitat for several protected bird species. Then Maggie made her biggest mistake. Her crew began installing permanent concrete barriers to completely block the original creek bed. This would make my spillway useless and permanently destroy the downstream ecosystem, but it also gave me the perfect legal justification for what I was about to do. At 7:02 in the morning, with federal EPA agents watching and the sun painting the sky orange, I opened the spillway gates to 25% capacity. The sound was magnificent. Not the violent rush of destruction, but the gentle whisper of water returning home. For the first time in 18 months, Willow Creek began flowing in its original bed, exactly where nature intended. Miguel Santos knelt beside the restored creek and cupped the clear water in his weathered hands, tears streaming down his face. "This is the water that fed my grandfather's farm for 60 years, he whispered. Maggie's reaction was immediate. She screamed at the EPA agents to arrest the terrorist. EPA agent Sarah Kim calmly explained that I had the legal right to operate my agricultural flood control system. Maggie was live streaming on Facebook, her voice cracking. "He's flooding our children's homes!" Except the water was not flooding anything. It was flowing exactly where it belonged, in the original creek bed that her development had illegally blocked. Rick was frantically calling the judge, screaming about property values and campaign contributions. What he forgot was that Amanda was standing on the courthouse steps, recording every word. Texas is a one-party consent state. You only need one person's permission to record a conversation. That person can be yourself. 6 months later, justice flowed naturally as the restored creek. Rick Thornwell pleaded guilty to federal conspiracy charges, 3 years in federal prison. Maggie faced $8.7 million in civil penalties and filed for bankruptcy. The construction company paid $12 million in EPA fines. The HOA dissolved completely. My property value restored to $1.2 million after the federal environmental designation made it more valuable than any suburban development ever could. Mrs. Chen's garden filled with water for the first time in 18 months. Miguel Santos got his family farm back, debt-free. Protected fish species recovered to pre-diversion levels within 4 months. Kids swim in that creek now, where McMansions were supposed to be built. Every Sunday, I visit Pops's grave and bring water in a mason jar, just like he used to do after heavy rains. "Thanks, Pops," I tell him. "The creek is singing again, just like you said it would." Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to take what was yours because they thought you were too far away to fight back? Drop your story in the comments. And if this reminded you that regular people can still win, hit that like button. I've got more stories just like this. See you next time.